Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnett Bain.
I feel so buzzy. Every cell I'm so awakened in the aftermath of any time that I hear, listen to, or have the great pleasure of being in a personal conversation with Jean Houston. She fires up my pilot light in ways that very few people in the world do.
All right, so I love how she admonished me. She said, don't pathologize, mythologize. And it's such a great way to get to the heart of at least a thread. I mean, I'm not saying we can't look at it from both vantage points, but I love that notion of going into the deeper thread.
Why would you want to look at it from both vantage points when we have been blessed with a gift of perception and insight,
right,
that offers a deeper cut?
So I would say, this is something you say often, looking at it from the one particular vantage point without losing sight of another way that we might look at it. So it's not
without dismissing it,
right,
but not putting a whole lot of attention into it.
No, of course not. That's the whole point. I'm loving how heartfelt that is to mythologize. And when I think about pathologizing, I think in terms of analyzing and drawing conclusion versus the opening process of mythologizing, where we look at the deeper threads that are running through this sort of, the mythical stories that
the archetypal energies. There are only so many that we. She uses this metaphor for her writing of being a cook, of blending flavors and tastes and spices. There are only so many archetypal energies. There's 33 of the major arcana, and then there's the minor arcana, and there are only so many prime frequencies inside the bandwidth that we have a relationship to, and we mix and blend and create great dishes out of them. So the mythologizing, those mythologies refer to the underlying matrix of these archetypal energies, these myths, through which we express our lives.
It's beautiful. It's very beautiful. And a way to interpret experiences that deepens. And, again, specifically when the tornadoes are coming, the little tornadoes, unable to get into my car or having to get a car fixed. And
the tornadettes.
The tornadettes.
The mini-dos.
Yeah, that show up. And really, to the degree we're resisting it, it's just getting worse. But to the degree we actually allow it to take us, wherever it's going to take us, and then being able to relate to it in this more dimensional way, and seeing, again, the reflection for me in my struggle with the guys at the car shop, or the challenges that or the propensity to go towards martyr and go into that version.
What do you mean by martyr?
Well, the victim sort of mindset that something's happening to me, and my desire to complain about it and make other people wrong, and all of that is less constructive, less constructive than relating to what's showing up and owning it. And even owning it feels like I'm into some dogma or even jargon.
How about recognizing it and acknowledging it?
There you go. And being sort of with the experience of my own anger and my own hostility and my own desire to win.
So being with it without having to dump it on someplace, just to be with it, and then it dissipates.
Right. And be with the part of me that wants to make it about. There's a part of me that wants to make it about those guys and people these days and the world as I see it, and rail against the whole thing. And that's okay. I can do that. But you and I have said many times, it's a developmental stage.
It's a developmental stage to be identified with it, but it's not a developmental stage the archetype, the myth itself, is not developmental.
Right.
It is my reliance on it is developmental. When I was a small child, I relied on throwing a tantrum to get attention, and I'm still relying on that particular bombastic expression of energy that frightens people. I mean, that is an archetypal energy, that particular kind of explosiveness. It has adult clothes on it, but it's not necessarily that doesn't make it an adult.
Right.
So that's the part that's developmental. Archetypal energies and mythologies are not developmental. They're electricity. They're just, you put your finger in the socket, it'll fry you. It doesn't care how old you are.
You said it to me. So we were on the phone yesterday, and you said, I could complain, but
Yes.
we both know that's not going to get me anywhere.
That's right.
And it was classic.
I could feel
fantastic.
helpless
Right.
and hopeless and unappreciated and misunderstood, with problems too great to bear.
That's right.
I could wander down that.
Right.
Now, those are not, those archetypal energies are not in themselves developmental, but my capacity to choose or to elect which one. There's 32 other just major ones.
That's right. And there's more tools.
Pull out a tarot deck and pull out a tarot deck, and we should let's make a commitment, you and I. This week we're going to get a tarot deck. We're just going to take the top 33 suits, and we're going to spend some time every day living into, I could live into the magician instead of the martyr.
Yeah.
I could live into the emperor. I could live into the empress energy. I could live into, there's such a, but I default back to 3 or 4.
Right. So I love this, because what you're saying and what you're saying when you say I could complain, but we both know that's not going to get me anywhere, was that now there's more options. Like, and I love the way you've said this, and you said it now, and you've said it in the past. Let me move frequency. Let me live into another archetypal way of relating to this, that might be more constructive than the 3 or 4 that I tend to default to. That's brilliant.
There are some men's organizations that do men's work that I'm aware of. I haven't done them, but I have.
I've done several.
You've done several. I have. Maybe it was you who told me about this, and then our buddy Scott Cody also does some of this work, and it's beautiful work, where he talks about 4 of these archetypes: the king archetype, and the lover, and the
magician, and the thief, I think. But maybe there's a different one that he uses. I don't know.
So, and that is really powerful. But there's a really big menu. It's like if I was a painter and I only had 4 colors.
Yeah.
There's a very, very big menu, and to begin to develop a relationship and a closeness and a tenderness with my default expressions of the mythologies that are living through me and that I am living inside of, those archetypes, to become tender with them and to put a name to them. Only when I name something am I be able to relate to it, as opposed to being inside the bubble and being identified with it. Now I can have a relationship with it, and that's the door to freedom swings open. And now I say, now I can call you up and say, Freeman, here's what's going on with the car and the AAA, and I want a coffee and wine. And but do I really want to go down the hopeless, helpless, fainting road right now?
Not so
There's a name on it, and it allows me to choose, to have choice. I can shift the dial to any. I could go to this exploring energy who's there as a discoverer of something. Well, how's this going to turn out? What next? There were so many other options.
Right, and I want to go back. I'll tell you something that's grabbed my attention lately, and it's this crazy story. It may sound like I'm off track, but I don't think I am. The story about the guy from Cleveland who kidnapped the 3 women and who held them hostage for 10, 11, however many years. I think 1 10 years, 1 11 years, 1 9 years, or something like this. and how charged that is. We were talking, I told you this when we went to coffee, that it's really grabbed my attention. And we were talking about a little bit, how do we relate to it, in terms as a mirror? What this exaggerated desire to control and this exaggerated objectification and dehumanizing of women in this case. How do I own that in my own experience and just see this as an amplified reflection in order to respond to it, in order to be in relationship with it, versus just demonize it and want to crush it and kill it and push it down and make it wrong and rail against it. It fits in this moment because when I see these exaggerations, it's a call to me personally to move into some kind of relationship with that.
Well, there's so many, many ways that we could approach, that we could explore this issue. We've been talking about archetypes and mythologies, which mythologies are the stories that emerge out of archetypal energies. And that is a very powerful mythology. There's a couple of them. There's I think it's Orpheus. There's the Persephone myth. Persephone, who was stolen away to the underworld and kept there for half the year, and then allowed to return to her family for half the year, and then taken away against her will. So there we have these frequencies, we have these stories that are a part of who we are, is a part of what it is to be human. All of these fundamental stories that we blend and mix and match. Built on top of those, we lay on our own spin, our own stories of what happened to me and how I got over what happened to me, using those big tools. So there are all kinds of things that the various players in that drama have brought to it. As a bystander, as a viewer, I am aware of some of these mythologies. I'm aware of the parts of me that I have buried. I'm aware of the parts of me that I have hijacked. I am aware of how those archetypal energies play in my life, where I am, even if I don't deny somebody else's feelings.
That's it.
I very often do so, and sometimes I do it very consciously. There are times when I will absolutely annihilate another person emotionally or mentally or physically, or not physically, or spiritually, and I will I will control them to my will. I somehow tap into something and I abandon discernment and I abandon responsibility and I allow myself to make choices that rob somebody else of their potential.
That piece,
that's a possibility too.
That piece is so powerful. The little ways where, so this is this amplified version, but in what little ways do I, want to dominate and control other people? Not to the degree that I'm tying them up in my basement, but the idea that it's these little subtle ways that this is being reflected that are the parts of me I don't like. What I love about it in a general context, because we're at the end of the show, is the way of processing and or experiencing the mythological context, right? The mythological consciousness, so that we can make sense of it in a way that's constructive.
Well, she said, Jean, she said we can either pathologize it and make it about what's wrong with me and look to dig out the cancer.
Right.
Or we can begin to enter a more mature relationship with it, where we're not all identified with what happened to me or how I got over what happened to me. A more mature relationship with the bigger forces and see how they are also expressing in me. And when I own that and I have a different kind of more compassionate sense of it, I can release some of that. And because we are all separate and connected at the same time, it has a systemic impact. We may think that it is only a personal shift that I'm making, but what if it is a systemic shift? What if when I change, everything changes?
It's a much bigger context to hold it. All right, we need to say goodbye, but folks, this is going to continue because this conversation goes on and on, especially about the distinction between pathologizing and mythologizing is such a brilliant distinction. I'm sure we'll bring it up again. For now, though, we have to say goodbye. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.